The iron shackles around her wrists had left scars that would never fade. But it was the invisible chains wrapped around her heart that truly kept Evangeline Moss prisoner even after she ran. She had been running for 3 days through the scorching New Mexico territory, her threadbare dress torn and dirty, her feet bleeding through the worn soles of boots that belonged to a life she was desperately trying to escape. It was June of 1878, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the desert landscape as she stumbled through sagebrush and red rock, always looking over her shoulder, always expecting to hear the thunder of hooves bringing her back to the hell she had fled. Evangeline was 22 years old, though she felt ancient. She had been sold to Luther Blackwood when she was just 18, fresh off a wagon train that had been attacked by bandits. Her parents were dead, her brother killed defending them, and when the smoke cleared, she found herself standing in the dirt with nothing but the dress on her back. Luther Blackwood had been there that day, a wealthy rancher who saw opportunity in tragedy. He offered her shelter, food, safety. What he did not mention was the price. 4 years. 4 years of being his property, his possession, locked in that ranch house with bars on the windows and a padlock on the door. 4 years of being told she was nothing, worth nothing, owned completely. Luther had never struck her, which somehow made it worse. He was always calm, always controlled, always reminding her with that cold smile that she had nowhere to go, no one who cared, no way to survive without him. But Evangeline had learned to watch and wait. She had learned that even the most careful jailer makes mistakes. 3 nights ago, Luther had drunk too much whiskey celebrating a cattle deal, and for the first time in 4 years, he forgot to lock the door. Evangeline had not hesitated. She grabbed what little she could carry and ran into the night. Now, stumbling through the desert with the sun climbing toward noon, she wondered if freedom was just another word for dying alone in the wilderness. Her canteen was empty. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. The horizon shimmered with heat, making it impossible to tell what was real and what was mirage. She crested a small rise and saw, in the distance, what looked like a town. Or perhaps it was just another cruel trick of the desert. Evangeline forced herself forward, 1 foot in front of the other, even as her vision started to blur and her legs threatened to give out entirely. She never saw the rattlesnake coiled beside the rock. She only heard its warning buzz a second before it struck. Evangeline jerked backward, lost her footing and tumbled down the rocky slope, the world spinning in a chaos of sky and stone. When she came to rest at the bottom, pain radiating through her ribs and shoulder, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. Horses. Multiple horses moving fast. Luther had found her. Evangeline tried to stand, but her ankle gave out beneath her. She dragged herself behind a large boulder, pressing her back against the sun-heated stone, breathing hard, trying not to sob. After everything, after finally tasting freedom, she was going to be dragged back to that ranch, back to that locked room, back to being property. The horses grew closer. She could hear men's voices now, rough and low. Evangeline closed her eyes, pressing her fist against her mouth to keep from crying out. This was it. This was the end of her brief, desperate flight toward something better. Hold up, a voice called out, and the horses stopped. Tracks here, recent, someone came down this slope hard. Evangeline's heart hammered against her ribs. Heavy footsteps crunched through the gravel, coming closer. She pressed herself harder against the rock, even though she knew it was useless. Ma'am. The voice was different from what she expected. Younger, gentler. Ma'am, if you are out here, we are not going to hurt you. My name is Thomas Bridger. I am a cattleman passing through with my crew. We saw dust from your fall and came to help. It was a trick. It had to be a trick. Luther was clever. He would say anything to draw her out. Ma'am, you are in bad country out here alone. There is a town about 2 miles north. We can take you there, get you water and medical attention. No questions asked. Evangeline stayed silent, barely breathing. The footsteps came around the boulder, and she finally opened her eyes to look up at the man who had found her. He was not Luther Blackwood. He was younger, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and brown hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty range clothes and a faded blue shirt, a gun belt slung low on his hips. But it was his eyes that made Evangeline's breath catch. They were gray-green, like sage after rain, and they looked at her with something she had almost forgotten existed, genuine concern. Thomas Bridger took in her appearance in one quick glance. The torn dress, the bleeding feet, the way she was curled against the rock like a wounded animal ready to bolt or bite. He slowly crouched down, keeping his distance, his hands visible and empty. "Nobody is going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I give you my word." Evangeline wanted to laugh at that. Words meant nothing. Luther had given her words too in the beginning, promises of safety and care. But her body was failing, her mouth was desert dry, and she had nowhere else to go. She managed a small nod. Thomas turned his head and called out, "Bring a canteen and a blanket, and tell the boys to give us some space." He looked back at her. "I am going to stand up now and take a few steps back. One of my men will bring water. You drink slow, understand? Small sips, or you will make yourself sick." An older man with a weathered face and kind eyes appeared with the canteen and a blanket. He set them on the ground between Evangeline and Thomas, then backed away. Thomas picked up the canteen, uncapped it, and held it out. "Just water," he said. "Nothing else." Evangeline's hand shook as she reached for it. The first sip was heaven. The second was salvation. She forced herself to stop after the third, even though every fiber of her being screamed for more. "Good," Thomas said. "You have got sense. That is good. Can you stand?" "I think my ankle is hurt," Evangeline whispered. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, rough from disuse. She had barely spoken in the last 3 days. "All right. With your permission, I am going to come closer and take a look. If you want me to stop at any point, you just say so." Evangeline nodded again. Thomas moved slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a spooked horse. He knelt beside her injured ankle, his touch gentle as he examined it. "Swollen, but probably not broken. A bad sprain. You are not going to be walking on it for a while." He looked up at her face. "Those bruises on your wrists, how old are they?" Evangeline instinctively pulled her sleeves down, covering the circular scars where shackles had once rubbed her skin raw. "Old enough." Thomas's jaw tightened, but he did not press. Instead, he stood and called out, "I am going to carry her." "Get the horses ready." "No," Evangeline said quickly. The thought of being held, being carried, made panic flutter in her chest. "Ma'am, it is 2 miles to town in this heat. You cannot walk it, and we cannot leave you here." "I know you have got no reason to trust me, but I swear on my mother's grave I mean you no harm. I'm just going to get you to town, to safety. After that, you never have to see me again if you do not want to." There was something in his voice, in those storm-colored eyes, that made Evangeline want to believe him. Maybe it was delirium from the heat, maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the simple fact that he had asked permission instead of just taking. "All right," she whispered. Thomas wrapped the blanket around her shoulders despite the heat, giving her a layer of protection, of coverage. Then he slipped one arm behind her back and another beneath her knees, lifting her with surprising gentleness. Evangeline tensed, every muscle in her body coiled tight, but Thomas just carried her to his horse and settled her in the saddle before swinging up behind her. "I have got you," he said quietly. "You are safe now." Evangeline did not believe him. She could not afford to believe him. But as the horse started moving toward the distant town, as Thomas's arm stayed carefully, respectfully around her waist to keep her steady, something inside her chest cracked just a little. The town was called Socorro, a dusty settlement that had grown up along the Rio Grande. Thomas took her straight to the doctor's house, a small adobe building on the edge of town. Dr. Chen was a middle-aged Chinese man who had come west with the railroad workers and stayed when he saw how desperately the territory needed medical help. He examined Evangeline's ankle, cleaned and bandaged her feet, and gave her water and broth while Thomas waited outside on the porch. When the doctor was finished, he stepped out to speak with the cowboy. Evangeline could hear their voices through the open window. She is severely dehydrated and malnourished, Dr. Chen said. Those scars on her wrists are old from restraints. The bruising patterns suggest prolonged captivity. This woman has been through hell. I figured as much, Thomas said quietly. What does she need? Rest, food, safety. And probably some time before she trusts anyone again. Where will she go? There was a long pause. I do not know, she has not said much, but she is not going back to wherever she came from, that much is clear. The boarding house might take her, Dr. Chen suggested. Mrs. Flores is kind and she could use help with the cleaning and cooking. It would give the girl a place to stay and a way to earn her keep. I will talk to Mrs. Flores, Thomas said, and I will pay her board for the first month. After that, if the girl wants to stay and work, that is between them. You are a good man, Thomas Bridger. I am just doing what is right. Evangeline closed her eyes, overwhelmed. This stranger was arranging her life, making decisions for her, and part of her wanted to rage against it. But another part, the part that was exhausted and hurting and terrified, was grateful that someone was carrying the weight for a moment. When Thomas came back inside, he pulled up a chair and sat across from her, keeping a respectful distance. Dr. Chen says you need rest and food. There is a boarding house in town run by a woman named Mrs. Flores. She is good people. I have arranged for you to stay there for a month, and if you want, you can work for her after that to earn your keep. But that is up to you. If you would rather move on or go somewhere else, that is your choice. I just wanted to give you some options. Evangeline stared at him. Why are you doing this? Thomas was quiet for a moment. My sister, he finally said. I had a sister younger than me. When I was 19 and she was 16, she met a man. He was older, charming, said all the right things. My parents did not approve, but Sarah was headstrong. She ran off with him. He looked down at his hands. It took us 6 months to find her. By then, she was locked in a cabin 50 miles from anywhere, half-starved, covered in bruises. The man had convinced her she was nothing without him, that no one would want her back. What happened? Evangeline asked softly. We got her out, brought her home. It took years, but Sarah healed. She is married now to a good man who treats her like a queen. She has 2 little girls and a ranch in Colorado. Thomas looked up, meeting Evangeline's eyes. But I never forgot what she looked like when we found her. That look in her eyes, like she was not quite sure if she was really free or if it was all just a dream. You have that same look. Evangeline felt tears burning behind her eyes. I was somebody's property once, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. For 4 years, he bought me, owned me, kept me locked up like I was just another piece of furniture in his house. Thomas's expression went hard, but his voice stayed gentle. Now you are your own woman, he said firmly. You hear me? Whatever happened before, whoever did that to you, that is done. You are free now, and nobody gets to own you ever again. The tears spilled over then, running down Evangeline's dusty cheeks. She could not remember the last time she had cried. Luther had liked it when she cried at first, then grew bored of it, so she had learned to lock everything down inside. But something about this cowboy's words, about the certainty in his voice, broke through all her carefully constructed walls. Thomas handed her a handkerchief, still keeping his distance. You go ahead and cry all you need to, you have earned it. So she did. She cried for the girl she had been before the wagon train attack. She cried for 4 lost years. She cried for the fear that still gripped her heart, the certainty that Luther would find her and drag her back. And she cried because a stranger had shown her more kindness in one afternoon than she had known in 4 years. When the tears finally stopped, Evangeline felt emptied out, but also somehow lighter. She took a shaky breath and wiped her face with the handkerchief. Thank you, she whispered. No thanks needed. Come on, let me take you to the boarding house. Mrs. Flores will get you settled. Mrs. Flores turned out to be a round, warm woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and a smile that could melt butter. She took one look at Evangeline and immediately swept into action, clucking in Spanish as she led the limping girl to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. You rest now, she said in accented English. I bring you food, hot water for bath. You are safe here, Mija. This is good house. No bad men allowed. True to her word, she returned with a tray of beans, rice, and warm tortillas, followed by a copper tub of hot water. Evangeline ate slowly, savoring every bite, then sank into the bath with a groan of relief. She scrubbed 4 years of captivity from her skin, watching the water turn gray with dirt and old fear. When she finally emerged, clean and dressed in a simple cotton nightgown Mrs. Flores had left for her, Evangeline felt almost human again. She limped to the window and looked out at the street below. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and gold. She could see Thomas Bridger standing outside the saloon across the street, talking with some of his men. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and he touched the brim of his hat in a small salute. Evangeline felt her heart skip. She told herself it was just gratitude. He had saved her life, after all. It was natural to feel something. But as she watched him disappear into the saloon, she could not quite shake the warmth that had bloomed in her chest when he looked at her. She turned away from the window and climbed into the bed. The sheets were clean, the mattress soft. There were no locks on the door, no bars on the window. She was free. But freedom, she was discovering, was terrifying in its own way. She had no money, no family, no skills beyond what she had learned keeping house for Luther Blackwood. What was she going to do? Where would she go? Those questions swirled through her mind as she drifted into an uneasy sleep. Thomas Bridger sat at a corner table in the saloon, nursing a whiskey he had barely touched. His foreman, a grizzled man named Pete Hansen, sat across from him. "You did a good thing today," Pete said. "Taking in that girl? I did not take her in, I just got her to town. You know what I mean, most men would have just ridden past." Thomas turned the glass in his hands. "I could not just leave her out there, because of your sister. Maybe." Thomas took a small sip. "Or maybe because it is just the right thing to do," Pete nodded. "What are you going to do now?" "What do you mean?" "Thomas, I have known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. I have seen that look before. You are not going to just ride out of here tomorrow and forget about that girl." Thomas scowled. "I barely know her." "Yet," Pete said with a knowing smile. "Come on, boy, we have got time. The herd is settled, we are ahead of schedule. A few extra days in Socorro is not going to hurt anything." "I just want to make sure she is all right," Thomas said defensively. "That she is really safe before we move on." "Sure, that is all it is." Pete stood up, still smiling. "I am going to turn in, you should too. Tomorrow's another day." After Pete left, Thomas stayed at the table thinking about Evangeline Moss. He did not even know if that was her real name. She had not offered it, and he had not asked, but he could not get her face out of his mind. Those dark eyes, full of pain and fear, but also something else. Strength. Determination. This was a woman who had survived hell and still had the courage to run toward something better. He finished his whiskey and headed to the boarding house where his men were staying, a different establishment than Mrs. Flores's place. As he walked through the quiet streets, he made a decision. They would stay in Socorro for a week. That would give Evangeline time to recover, to figure out what she wanted to do next. And if he was being honest with himself, it would give him time to make sure she was truly safe, because Pete was right. Thomas could not just ride away. Not yet. The next morning, Evangeline woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from downstairs. For a moment, panic seized her. She was in a strange room, a strange bed. Then memory returned, and with it, cautious relief. She was in Socorro. She was free. Her ankle was still swollen, but the pain had subsided to a dull ache. She dressed carefully in a simple blue dress Mrs. Flores had left folded on the chair. It was a bit loose, but clean and whole. Evangeline could not remember the last time she had worn something that was not torn or stained. She made her way downstairs, gripping the banister for support. Mrs. Flores was in the kitchen, flipping tortillas on a griddle. "Good morning, Mija. You sleep well?" "Yes, thank you. Better than I have in a long time." Sit, I make you breakfast, Mrs. Flores bustled around, piling a plate with eggs, bacon, and fresh tortillas. She set it in front of Evangeline along with a cup of strong coffee. "You eat. You are too skinny." Evangeline ate slowly, savoring every bite, as she did Mrs. Flores chattered away in a mix of Spanish and English, telling her about the other boarders, about the town, about her late husband who had been a merchant. It was overwhelming after so much silence, but also comforting. Mrs. Flores asked no questions, made no demands. She just talked and cooked and made Evangeline feel, for the first time in years, like a normal person. After breakfast, there was a knock at the front door. Mrs. Flores answered it, and Evangeline heard a familiar deep voice. "Good morning, ma'am. I came to check on your new guest, if that is all right. Come in, she is in the kitchen." Thomas Bridger appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. He looked freshly shaved and a bit nervous. "Morning," he said. "I wanted to see how you were doing, if you need anything." "I am fine," Evangeline said. "Thank you for everything. You are welcome." Thomas hesitated. "I was wondering if maybe when you are feeling up to it you might want to take a walk, show you around town a bit. Only if you want to," he added quickly. "I do not want to impose." Evangeline looked at him, at the genuine kindness in his eyes, and made a decision. She could stay locked in this room, afraid of the world, afraid of Luther finding her, or she could start living again. "I would like that," she said softly. Thomas's face broke into a smile that transformed him from handsome to beautiful. "Good. How about this afternoon? Give your ankle a little more time to rest." "This afternoon," Evangeline agreed. When Thomas left, Mrs. Flores gave Evangeline a sly look. "He is a good man, that one." "And handsome too, no?" Evangeline felt her cheeks heat. "He is just being kind. We will see, Mija, we will see." That afternoon, Thomas returned as promised. Evangeline had borrowed a shawl from Mrs. Flores and pinned her dark hair back. She still looked too thin, too pale, but there was a hint of color in her cheeks that had not been there the day before. Thomas offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Evangeline took it. They walked slowly through Soccero's dusty streets, Thomas pointing out the general store, the blacksmith, the church, the schoolhouse. The town was small but lively, with people going about their business. Several folks nodded to Thomas as they passed. "You are well known here," Evangeline observed. "I have passed through a few times over the years. Good people in Soccero, they remember faces." They ended up at the edge of town, where a small creek ran through a grove of cottonwood trees. Thomas spread his jacket on the ground for Evangeline to sit on, then settled beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "This is nice," Evangeline said, watching the water sparkle in the afternoon sun. "Peaceful." "It is. I like finding spots like this when I am driving cattle. Reminds me that the world is not all dust and danger." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Evangeline said, "You asked about my name yesterday. I did not give it to you." "You do not have to. I want to. It is Evangeline Moss, Eva for short." "That is a pretty name." "Suits you?" "My mother chose it. She said it meant good news." Was she right? Evangeline considered. She thought she was. We were coming west for a new life, a fresh start. My father had bought land in California, but we never made it. Bandits attacked the wagon train in 1874. My parents were killed, my brother too. I was the only one left. "I am sorry," Thomas said quietly. "So am I." Evangeline picked at a blade of grass. "There was a man there that day, Luther Blackwood. He owned a big ranch about 30 miles from where the attack happened. He offered to take me in, give me shelter. I was 18 and alone and terrified. I thought he was saving me. But he was not. No, he brought me to his ranch, and that night he locked me in a room, told me I belonged to him now. That I would cook and clean and do whatever he said, and if I tried to leave, he would find me and make sure I regretted it." Evangeline's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I lived in that house for 4 years. 4 years of being told I was nothing, that I had no choice, that I would never be free." Thomas's hands clenched into fists. "Where is this ranch north of here? Maybe a 3 or 4 day ride." "But Thomas, you cannot." "I am not going to do anything stupid," Thomas said, though his voice was tight with anger. "But if this man comes looking for you, if he shows up in Sakuro, I need to know what I am dealing with." "He will come," Evangeline said softly. "I know he will. Luther does not like to lose his possessions, and that is what I was to him. Property?" Thomas turned to look at her, his gray-green eyes intense. "Eva, listen to me. You are not property, you are a person. A strong, brave person who survived something terrible and had the courage to run. And if this Luther Blackwood comes looking for you, he is going to find out that you are not alone anymore." "You do not owe me anything," Evangeline said. "You have already done so much. This is not about owing, this is about what is right." Thomas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm and calloused from years of ranch work. "You are not going back to that ranch, I promise you that." Evangeline looked down at their joined hands. She should pull away. She barely knew this man. But his touch was gentle, asking nothing, offering only comfort and protection. And God help her, she wanted to believe in his promise. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat by the creek until the sun started to set, talking about safer things. Thomas told her about his ranch in Colorado, about his sister Sarah and her family, about the years he had spent trailing cattle across the territories. Evangeline talked about her childhood in Missouri, about her mother's garden and her father's terrible jokes. For a few hours, they were just two people getting to know each other, and the weight of the past lifted just a little. When Thomas walked her back to the boarding house, he paused at the door. "Can I see you again tomorrow?" he asked. "You are staying in town for a little while." "My men and I are ahead of schedule. We have got time." Evangeline smiled, a real smile that felt strange on her face. "I would like that." Over the next week, Thomas and Evangeline fell into a routine. He would come by in the mornings and they would walk through town or sit by the creek. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. Evangeline found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of his voice and the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Mrs. Flores, for her part, was delighted. She watched the romance blooming in her boarding house with the pride of a matchmaker, even though she had nothing to do with it. "He is courting you, Mija," she told Evangeline one morning. "A proper courtship, very sweet." "We are just friends," Evangeline protested, though her blush gave her away. You keep telling yourself that." The truth was, Evangeline was terrified of what she was feeling. Thomas Bridger had become important to her in a way that made her vulnerable. She had spent 4 years building walls around her heart, learning not to want anything, not to hope for anything. But Thomas was breaking through those walls with every gentle word, every respectful touch, every promise that she was safe, and part of her was furious at herself for falling for it. What if he was just like Luther? What if this was all an elaborate game? But every time those thoughts crept in, she would look into Thomas's eyes and see nothing but honesty. He never pushed, never demanded. He asked permission before touching her hand. He respected her boundaries. He treated her like a person, not a possession. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. On the 8th day of Thomas's stay in Sakuro, Evangeline was helping Mrs. Flores hang laundry when she saw riders coming into town from the north. Her blood ran cold. She knew those horses. She knew that silhouette in the lead. Luther Blackwood had found her. She dropped the sheet she was holding and stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. Mrs. Flores grabbed her arm. "Mija, what is wrong?" "He is here," Evangeline whispered. "Luther, he found me, Mrs." Flores's face hardened. "You go inside. Lock the door, I will get Thomas." But Evangeline could not move. She stood frozen in the yard as Luther and his 3 hired men rode up to the boarding house. Luther dismounted, and Evangeline saw that he looked exactly the same. Tall and lean, with silver-streaked dark hair and cold blue eyes. He was handsome in a sharp, dangerous way, and he always dressed well, even for travel. "Evangeline," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I have been looking everywhere for you. Come now, it is time to go home." "No," Evangeline said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I am not going back. Luther's smile did not reach his eyes. Of course you are. You are confused, that is all. 4 years in my care and you suddenly think you can survive on your own. Evangeline, be reasonable. You have no money, no skills, no family. Where would you go? What would you do? I will figure it out. But I am not your property anymore, Luther. I am free. Free, Luther laughed. You were nothing when I found you, a helpless girl standing over her dead parents, crying in the dirt. I gave you a home, food, a purpose, and this is how you repay me. By stealing away in the night like a common thief, you kept me prisoner, Evangeline said, her voice shaking but steady. You locked me up, told me I was worthless, that I belonged to you. That is not kindness. That is cruelty. Luther's expression darkened. I am losing patience, Evangeline. Get your things. We are leaving, now. She said no. Thomas Bridger stepped out of the saloon across the street, Pete and 4 other men behind him. He walked with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to handle himself, his hand resting casually near his gun belt. Luther looked him over dismissively. This does not concern you, Cowboy. This is between me and my ward. Your ward. Thomas stopped a few feet away. Funny way to describe a prisoner. I do not know what lies Evangeline has told you, but I assure you she has a tendency toward dramatics. She is unstable, prone to flights of fancy. I have been caring for her for years, and she needs to come home where she can be properly supervised. Is that so? Thomas looked at Evangeline. Eva, do you want to go with this man? No, Evangeline said firmly. I never want to see him again. There is your answer, Thomas said to Luther. The lady is not interested. Time for you to move on. Luther's face flushed with anger. I have papers, he snapped. Legal documents stating that Evangeline Moss is under my guardianship. She was a minor when she came to my care and the arrangement is binding. She is 22 years old, Thomas said. Not a minor. Any arrangement you had is done. I am not leaving without her. Yes, Thomas said quietly, dangerously. You are. The tension in the street was thick enough to cut. Luther's hired men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their guns. Thomas's men spread out, ready. Evangeline's heart hammered. This was going to turn bloody, and it was all her fault. Stop, she said loudly. Please, nobody needs to die over this. Eva, Thomas started, but she held up a hand. She looked at Luther, at the man who had controlled her life for 4 years. She had been so afraid of him for so long. But standing there in the street, with Thomas beside her and the open sky overhead, she realized something. Luther only had power over her if she gave it to him, and she was done giving him anything. You are right, Luther, she said. You did find me after the wagon train attack. You offered me shelter, but that does not give you the right to own me. I am not your ward, your property, or your possession. I am a free woman and I am choosing to stay here. If you have legal papers, then take me to court. Let a judge decide. But until then, you need to leave. Luther stared at her, and for the first time she saw uncertainty in his eyes. He had always controlled her through fear and isolation, but she was not afraid anymore and she was not alone. You will regret this, Luther said coldly. You have no idea how to survive out here without me. You will come crawling back within a month, begging me to take you in, and when you do, do not expect the same kindness I showed you before. I would rather die free than live as your prisoner, Evangeline said. Luther's jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he might do something stupid, might order his men to grab her. But he looked at Thomas and the other cowboys, all of them ready to fight, and apparently decided it was not worth the risk. This is not over, he said. He mounted his horse and looked down at Evangeline. You were nothing before me, and you will be nothing after. Remember that when you are starving in a ditch somewhere. Then he wheeled his horse around and rode out of town, his men following. Evangeline watched until they disappeared over the horizon, and only then did she allow herself to breathe. Her legs gave out. Thomas caught her before she hit the ground, his arms steady and strong. I have got you, he murmured. You are all right. He is gone. Evangeline clung to him, shaking. What if he comes back? What if he brings the law? Then we will deal with it. But Eva, I do not think he has any legal claim on you. I think he was bluffing, trying to scare you into coming back. He scared me, she admitted. I know, but you stood up to him anyway. That took real courage. Evangeline pulled back to look at him. You were ready to fight for me. You and your men, you could have been killed. You are worth fighting for, Thomas said simply, and that was when Evangeline knew. She was not just grateful to Thomas Bridger, she was not just comforted by his presence. She was falling in love with him. Maybe she had been since that first day in the desert when he knelt beside her with kind eyes and gentle hands, but love was terrifying. Love made you vulnerable. Love gave someone the power to hurt you in ways that nothing else could. I need to sit down, she said. Thomas helped her inside, where Mrs. Flores fussed over her with tea and worried Spanish. Thomas sat beside her, his hand covering hers on the table. He is going to try again, Evangeline said. Luther does not give up easily. Then we will be ready. Eva, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. What? Thomas took a deep breath. Come to Colorado with me, to my ranch. You will be safe there. Sarah would love to meet you, and there is plenty of room. You can stay as long as you want, and if you decide to move on, I will help you get wherever you want to go, but at least it would put distance between you and Blackwood. Evangeline's heart stuttered. Thomas, I cannot just impose on you like that. It is not imposing if I am asking. And Eva, I need you to understand something. These past 8 days, getting to know you, they have been the best days I have had in a long time. You are smart and strong and brave, and when I am around you, I feel like maybe the world is not quite as rough as I thought it was. I am not asking you to marry me or make any promises. I am just asking you to let me keep you safe while you figure out what you want from life. Evangeline looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much? Because you deserve to be cared about, Thomas said. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing, worth protecting. And because if I ride away from here and leave you behind, I am going to spend the rest of my life wondering if you are all right. Tears slipped down Evangeline's cheeks. I am afraid, she admitted. I am afraid of trusting you. I'm afraid of wanting something and having it taken away. I'm afraid that Luther is right, that I am nothing without someone to take care of me. You are not nothing, Thomas said fiercely. You are everything. And I am not trying to take care of you like you are helpless. I am offering you a place to land while you find your feet. There is a difference. Evangeline thought about Luther's ranch, that locked room, 4 years of being told she was worthless. Then she thought about Thomas's smile, the way he asked permission before touching her, the way he listened when she talked like her words actually mattered. All right, she said. I will come to Colorado. Thomas's face lit up. Yeah, but Thomas, I need you to promise me something. If I decide I want to leave, if I need to go somewhere else, you will let me go. No arguments, no trying to convince me otherwise. I need to know that I have that choice. I promise, Thomas said without hesitation. Your freedom is yours, Eva. Nobody gets to take that from you ever again. She believed him. God help her, she believed him. They left Socorro 3 days later. Thomas had business to finish, supplies to buy, and Mrs. Flores insisted on packing Evangeline enough food for a small army. The older woman cried when they said goodbye, making Evangeline promise to write. You are a good girl, Mrs. Flores said, hugging her tight. And he is a good man. You will be happy, Mija, I know it. The journey to Colorado took 2 weeks. Thomas's crew was made up of 5 men besides himself. Pete Hansen, the grizzled foreman Jimmy Chen doctor. Chen's nephew who had decided to try cowboying instead of medicine, Marcus White, a former Buffalo soldier with a quick smile and a quicker draw. Santiago Reyes, a vaquero who sang while he rode. And young Tom, a 19-year-old kid from Kansas who was still learning the ropes. They treated Evangeline with respect and kindness, and by the end of the first week, she felt like part of the crew. Santiago taught her some Spanish songs. Marcus told stories around the campfire that made her laugh until her sides hurt. Even young Tom, who was shy around women, started relaxing and joking with her. But it was Thomas who occupied most of her thoughts. He rode beside her during the day, pointing out landmarks and telling her about Colorado. At night, he made sure she had the best spot by the fire, the softest bedroll. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, but there was a growing awareness between them, a crackling tension that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with want. One night, about a week into the journey, Evangeline could not sleep. She got up from her bedroll and walked to the edge of camp, looking up at the stars. After a moment, she heard footsteps behind her. "Could not sleep either?" Thomas asked quietly. "Too much on my mind." He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching. "Want to talk about it? I keep thinking about what Luther said, that I was nothing before him and will be nothing after, and I hate that part of me wonders if he is right." "He is not right," Thomas said firmly. "Eva, do you know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "I see a woman who survived hell and came out the other side. I see someone who stood up to her abuser even though she was terrified. I see someone who makes my men laugh, who asks thoughtful questions, who notices when Jimmy is homesick and tells him stories to cheer him up. I see someone with a good heart and a strong spirit. That is not nothing. That is everything." Evangeline turned to look at him. The moonlight cast shadows across his face, making his eyes look even more silver. "Thomas, I am broken. Luther broke me. I do not know if I can ever be whole again." "You are not broken, you are healing. There is a difference." Thomas reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "And Eva, I do not need you to be whole, I just need you to be you." "I am scared," she whispered. "Of me? Of what I am starting to feel for you." Thomas's breath hitched. "And what are you feeling?" Evangeline gathered her courage. "Like maybe I could be happy again, like maybe I could have something good in my life, like maybe I am starting to fall in love with you, Eva." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "I have been falling for you since the moment I saw you behind that rock in the desert. You looked so fierce and frightened, and all I could think was that I would do anything to make you feel safe." "You do make me feel safe," Evangeline said. "That is what scares me. I have never trusted anyone the way I am starting to trust you." "Then trust this," Thomas said, and he leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When their lips met, it was gentle, questioning, a kiss that asked for nothing and offered everything. Evangeline's hands came up to clutch his shirt, and she kissed him back, pouring 4 years of loneliness and pain and desperate hope into that single moment of connection. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are worth loving," he said quietly. "You do not have to, I want to. Eva, I know it is too soon, and I know you are still healing, but I need you to know that I am in this for the long haul. Whatever you need, however long it takes, I am not going anywhere." Evangeline felt something crack open in her chest, some last bit of defense crumbling away. "All right," she whispered. "All right." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, and for the first time in 4 years, Evangeline allowed herself to hope. They reached Thomas's ranch in the Colorado high country on a warm afternoon in early July. The place was beautiful, nestled in a valley with mountains rising on 3 sides and a river running through the property. The ranch house was large and well-built, with a wide porch and flower boxes under the windows. As they rode up, a woman came running out of the house. She was petite and blonde with Thomas's same gray-green eyes. "Thomas," she cried, launching herself at him as he dismounted. "You are late. I was starting to worry." "I am fine, Sarah. Just took the scenic route." Thomas turned and held out his hand to Evangeline. "Sarah, this is Evangeline Moss." "Eva, this is my sister Sarah Watson." Sarah took one look at Evangeline and then at Thomas, and her whole face lit up. "Oh my God, Thomas, you brought home a woman, an actual woman." "Sarah," Thomas said, his ears turning red, "do not make this weird. Too late, it is definitely weird. I have been trying to get you married off for years, and you go and find someone on a cattle drive." Sarah grabbed Evangeline's hands. "I am so happy to meet you. Any woman who can put up with my brother must be special." Despite her nervousness, Evangeline found herself smiling. "It is nice to meet you too." Sarah's husband, Garrett, came out to greet them along with their two daughters, 4-year-old Emma and 2-year-old Lucy. Within minutes, Evangeline was swept into the chaos of family life. Sarah showed her to a room, chattering the whole time about the ranch and the neighbors and how wonderful it was to have another woman around. That night, after the girls were in bed, Sarah cornered Thomas in the kitchen. "Tell me everything," she demanded. "Who is she? Where did you find her? Are you courting her? Please tell me you are courting her." Thomas told her the whole story, editing out some of the more brutal details of Evangeline's captivity. By the end, Sarah had tears in her eyes. "That poor girl. Thomas, you did the right thing bringing her here, I know. But Sarah, I do not want to push her into anything. She is still healing, still figuring out who she is outside of what Blackwood made her. So you are courting her," Thomas sighed. "Yeah, I am courting her," Sarah hugged him tight. "I am proud of you, little brother. And for what it is worth, I like her. She has kind eyes." "She does," Thomas agreed softly. Over the next few weeks, Evangeline settled into life on the ranch. Sarah put her to work in the garden and the kitchen, teaching her to make bread and can vegetables. Garrett taught her to ride properly, not just sitting on a horse but actually controlling it. The little girls adored her, following her around and demanding stories, and Thomas courted her, properly, sweetly, with a patience that astounded her. He brought her wildflowers. He took her on rides through the mountains, showing her hidden valleys and crystal-clear streams. He sat with her on the porch in the evenings, holding her hand and talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, Evangeline began to believe that this could be real. That she could have this life, this family, this man who looked at her like she hung the moon. One evening in late August, Thomas took her to a meadow high up in the mountains. The wildflowers were in full bloom, a riot of purple and yellow and red. They dismounted and walked through the flowers, not talking, just being together. Finally, Thomas stopped and turned to face her. "Eva, I need to tell you something," her heart stuttered. "What? I love you. I am completely, hopelessly in love with you. And I know we have not been together long, and I know you are still healing, but I needed you to know. You do not have to say anything back. I just needed you to hear it." Evangeline looked up at him, at this good, kind man who had saved her life, and then spent months proving that he saw her as a person, not a possession. "I love you too," she said, her voice shaking. "I think I have loved you since that first day in the desert. And it terrifies me, but I do not want to be afraid anymore." Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You do not have to be afraid, not anymore, not ever again." "Will you marry me?" Evangeline asked suddenly. "I know that is supposed to be the man's question, but I am tired of waiting for things to happen to me. I want to choose this. I want to choose you." "So, Thomas Bridger, will you marry me?" Thomas laughed, a joyful sound that echoed across the meadow. "Yes, God, yes. Eva, I would marry you right now if I could. How about next month? That gives us time to plan something small, just family." Next month sounds perfect. They were married on a golden September afternoon in the meadow where Thomas had told her he loved her. Sarah cried through the whole ceremony. Garrett stood up as Thomas's best man, and Pete gave Evangeline away since she had no family of her own. The preacher from town came up to perform the service, and afterward, they had a simple meal on the ranch with all the hands and their families. That night in their room, Thomas held Evangeline close and whispered promises into her hair. "I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy." "You already have," Evangeline said. She turned in his arms to face him. "Thomas, I need you to know something. Luther broke a lot of things in me. There are going to be days when I am not okay, when the fear comes back, when I do not know how to be a wife or how to trust. I am going to need patience." "You have got it," Thomas said. "All the patience in the world. We will figure this out together." And they did. There were hard days, days when Evangeline woke up from nightmares and could not remember where she was. Days when a locked door or a man's raised voice sent her into panic. But Thomas was always there, steady and patient, reminding her that she was safe, that she was loved, that she was free. Gradually, the good days outnumbered the bad. Evangeline learned to laugh without feeling guilty. She learned to accept kindness without waiting for the other shoe to drop. She learned that love did not have to hurt, that it could be gentle and constant and real. In the spring of 1879, Sarah gave birth to a son, a healthy baby boy she named Thomas in honor of her brother. Evangeline held the infant and felt something stir in her own heart, a longing she had not allowed herself to feel in years. That night, she told Thomas, "I want a family. I want children with you. I was not sure if I ever would after everything, but I do. I want to build a life with you." Thomas kissed her softly. "Then that is what we will do." Their first child was born in March of 1880, a son they named James, after Thomas's father. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray-green eyes, and Evangeline fell in love with him the moment she saw him. Holding her son, watching Thomas cradle the baby with gentle hands, she finally understood what it meant to be truly free. Freedom was not just the absence of chains. It was the ability to choose to love, to build something beautiful from the ashes of pain. Life on the ranch was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, cattle that got sick, hands that moved on. But through it all, Thomas and Evangeline built something solid. They added on to the house, creating more room as their family grew. In 1882, they had a daughter, Elinor, with her father's smile and her mother's fierce spirit. In 1885, another son, Samuel, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved books more than horses. Sarah and Garrett's family grew too. More children, more laughter, more love filling the valley. The ranch prospered, and Thomas's reputation as a fair and honest cattleman spread. People came from all over the territory to buy his stock and learn his methods. But for Evangeline, the real wealth was in the small moments, Thomas teaching James to ride, Elinor helping her plant the garden. Samuel curled up in her lap while she read to him. Sunday dinners with Sarah's family, the table loud with conversation and joy. Nights on the porch with Thomas, watching the sunset and holding hands. One evening in the summer of 1888, 10 years after that day in the desert, Evangeline sat on the porch watching her children play in the yard. Thomas came out and settled beside her, his arm going around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far I have come. How different my life is now than I ever imagined it could be. Better or worse?" Evangeline leaned into him. "So much better. Thomas, do you remember what you said to me that first day? Now you are your own woman." "I remember. You were right. I am my own woman. But I am also yours and you are mine, and that is the most beautiful thing of all. I am not property. I am a partner, a wife, a mother. I am free to choose, and every day I choose this life with you." Thomas turned her face toward him and kissed her softly. "I love you, Eva Bridger." "I love you too." They sat there as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Their children's laughter rang out across the yard. Somewhere in the house, Sarah was singing while she helped with dinner. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and real and home. Evangeline thought about the girl she had been, locked in a room, believing she was nothing. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth, who had fought for her freedom and won. The scars on her wrists had faded to thin white lines, barely visible now. The scars on her heart had healed too, leaving only the faintest reminder of pain overcome. In the spring of 1889, word came that Luther Blackwood had died. Thrown from a horse, broken neck, instant death. The messenger who brought the news was a lawyer, come to inform Evangeline that Luther's will had left her his ranch. "Apparently, he never updated his papers after you left," the lawyer explained. "You are listed as his heir." Evangeline and Thomas traveled to New Mexico to see the place. The ranch house looked smaller than she remembered, and sadder. The bars were still on the windows of her old room. Looking at them, Evangeline felt nothing but pity for the man who had lived his life so full of fear and need for control that he had to cage another human being to feel powerful. "What do you want to do with it?" Thomas asked. Evangeline thought for a long moment. Then she said, "Sell it. Use the money to build a home for women who need a place to go, women like I was, with nowhere to turn and no one to help them. We will give them a choice, a chance to figure out what they want from life." "That is a beautiful idea," Thomas said. They sold the ranch for a good price and used the money to establish the Evangeline Bridger Home for Women in Socorro. Mrs. Flores was the first house mother, and Sarah helped run the operations. Women came from all over the territory, women fleeing bad situations, women who needed time to heal and figure out their next steps. Some stayed for weeks, some for months. All of them left stronger and more certain of their worth. Evangeline visited several times a year, bringing supplies and hope. She told the women her story, showed them her scars, and promised them that freedom was possible, that healing was possible, that a life full of love and joy was possible. "I was somebody's property once," she would tell them, "but now I am my own woman, and you can be too." The years rolled on, full and rich. James grew into a fine young man who took over more of the ranch operations, showing the same steady patience his father had. Elinor became a teacher, fierce and passionate about education. Samuel went to university and came back with a law degree, determined to help people who could not help themselves. Sarah and Garrett's children grew too, and eventually there were grandchildren running around the ranch, filling the valley with noise and life. Thomas's hair went gray at the temples, then silver. Evangeline's dark hair streaked with white. But they still held hands on the porch in the evenings, still looked at each other with the same love that had bloomed in the New Mexico desert all those years ago. In the summer of 1898, on their 20th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Evangeline back to that meadow where he had first told her he loved her. The wildflowers were in bloom, just as they had been 20 years before. "You remember what you asked me here," Thomas said. "I asked you to marry me, and I said yes. Best decision I ever made," Evangeline smiled. "We have had a good life, haven't not we? The best. Eva, when I think about that day in the desert, when I almost rode right past where you were hiding, I cannot imagine how different everything would have been. You changed my life. You made it better in every possible way." "You saved mine," Evangeline said. "In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Thomas corrected gently. They stood in the meadow, surrounded by flowers and memories, and Evangeline thought about all the years, all the moments that had brought them to this place. The pain and the healing, the fear and the courage, the darkness and the light. It had all been worth it. Every hard day, every tear, every moment of doubt had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this overwhelming sense of peace. Their children had families of their own now. James had married a rancher's daughter from the next valley over, and they had 3 children. Elinor had married her childhood sweetheart, a gentle man who taught music, and they had twin girls. Samuel had just gotten engaged to a woman he met at university, a smart, passionate lawyer like himself. The ranch continued to thrive under James's management. The home for women in Socorro was expanding, adding more rooms and more services. Sarah and Garrett were talking about retiring, maybe building a small house on the property to be closer to their grandchildren. Everything Evangeline had never dared to hope for had come true. She had a family. She had love. She had purpose and meaning and freedom. One fall evening in 1899, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Evangeline said, "I want to write it all down. Everything that happened from the wagon train attack to now, so our grandchildren will know. So they will understand where they came from and what it took to build this life." "That is a good idea," Thomas said. "You should. You have always been good with words." So Evangeline began to write. She filled journals with her story, holding nothing back. The pain of captivity, the terror of running, the moment Thomas found her in the desert. Their courtship, their marriage, the building of their life together. The home for women, the growing family, all the moments of joy and love that had filled their years. When she finished, she showed it to Thomas. He read it with tears in his eyes. This is beautiful, Eva, and it is important. People need to know that healing is possible, that love can triumph over pain. Evangeline's story was eventually published in a small Colorado newspaper, then picked up by larger papers across the country. Letters poured in from women who had read her words and found hope. Some came to visit the home in Socorro. Others simply wrote to say thank you, to say that they had been through something similar and Evangeline's story had helped them believe they could survive. In the spring of 1900, on a warm May afternoon, Evangeline sat on the porch surrounded by her entire family. Thomas beside her, their 3 children and their spouses, and a whole flock of grandchildren playing in the yard. Sarah and Garrett were there too, along with their children and grandchildren. Pete Hansen, now in his 70s, sat in a rocking chair telling stories to anyone who would listen. Looking at all of them, at this loud, chaotic, beautiful family, Evangeline felt her heart swell with gratitude. She thought about that girl in the desert, broken and afraid, and wished she could go back and tell her that everything was going to be all right, that she would survive, that she would find love and build a life beyond her wildest dreams. But she could not go back. All she could do was move forward, treasuring every moment, loving as hard as she could for as long as she was given. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Thomas and Evangeline sat on the porch in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. "Do you ever regret it?" Evangeline asked. "Taking me in that day, your life would have been simpler without me." "Simpler," Thomas agreed, "but not better, never better. Eva, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we built together, I would not change a single moment. Not even the hard parts, especially not the hard parts. They made the good parts sweeter." Evangeline leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Thomas Bridger. Thank you for seeing me that day in the desert. Thank you for treating me like I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving," Thomas said. "I just got lucky enough to be the one who found you." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars come out one by one. Somewhere in the house, a baby cried and was quickly soothed. A night bird called from the trees by the river. The world kept turning, as it always did, full of pain and joy and everything in between. But here in this moment, on this porch, with this man beside her and this family she had built, Evangeline knew peace. She was no longer somebody's property. She was her own woman, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a survivor. She was loved and loving, free and whole, and that was everything. The years continued to unfold with a gentle grace that Evangeline had once believed impossible. In 1902, Thomas and Evangeline celebrated their 24th anniversary by taking a trip to California, finally completing the journey her parents had started all those years ago. They stood on the beach and watched the sun set over the Pacific, and Evangeline whispered a prayer of thanks for the parents she had lost and the life she had found. In 1905, Samuel and his wife welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Evangeline. When they placed the baby in her grandmother's arms, Evangeline wept. This tiny person, named after her, would grow up free and loved and certain of her worth. She would never know what it meant to be property, to be powerless, and that was the greatest gift Evangeline could imagine. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. James proved to be an even better cattleman than his father, implementing new techniques and expanding the herd. He and Thomas worked side by side, father and son, building something that would last for generations. Eliner's school in town became one of the best in the territory, then the state when Colorado had become a state years before. She taught her students not just reading and arithmetic, but also how to think critically, how to question, how to stand up for themselves. Many of her female students went on to college, something that would have been unthinkable a generation before. Samuel's law practice focused on helping those who could not help themselves. He took on cases for women escaping bad marriages, for workers being cheated by their employers, for anyone who needed someone to fight for them. He never forgot his mother's story, and he made it his mission to be the advocate she had needed so desperately all those years ago. The home for women in Socorro continued to thrive. In 1907, they opened a second location in Denver and then a third in Pueblo. Mrs. Flores had passed away in 1903, but not before seeing her beloved project expand and help hundreds of women. Sarah took over full management, and the homes became known as safe havens throughout the region. Thomas and Evangeline grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They moved a bit slower. Their joints complained about the cold, but they were happy. Deliriously, completely happy. One winter evening in 1910, as they sat by the fire with blankets wrapped around their shoulders, Thomas said, "I have been thinking about the future." "What about it?" "I want to make sure everything is set up right. The ranch goes to James, we have already established that, but I want to make sure the home for women has enough funding to continue after we are gone. I want to set up a trust, something that will keep it going for generations." "That is a wonderful idea," Evangeline said. "And I want to add something. A scholarship fund for women who want to go to school but cannot afford it. Girls like I was, who have no family and no resources but who deserve a chance." They worked with Samuel to set it all up, making sure their legacy would continue long after they were gone. The Bridger Trust would fund the homes for women and provide scholarships for education. It would be their gift to the future, their way of ensuring that other women would have the chances and choices they deserved. In the spring of 1912, on a warm April morning, Thomas collapsed in the barn. He had been checking on a new foal when his heart simply gave out. By the time James found him and got him to the house, it was clear there was not much time left. Evangeline sat by his bedside, holding his hand, trying to memorize every detail of his face. Their children gathered around, along with Sarah and Garrett and what felt like half the county. Thomas had been well-loved, respected by everyone who knew him. "Eva," Thomas whispered, his voice weak but clear, "it has been the honor of my life to be your husband." "Thomas, do not," Evangeline said, tears streaming down her face. "You are going to be fine, you have to be fine. We both know that is not true." He squeezed her hand with what strength he had left. "But that is all right. I have had a good life, the best life, because I had you. I am not ready to let you go, I know. But Eva, you are going to be all right. You are the strongest person I have ever known, and you are surrounded by people who love you, our children, our grandchildren, Sarah. You will be all right. I love you," Evangeline whispered. "I have loved you for 34 years, and I will love you for the rest of my life." "I love you too, always." Thomas's eyes drifted closed. "Thank you for that day in the meadow. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for finding me in the desert. Thank you for giving me a life worth living." Thomas smiled, and then he was gone. The grief was overwhelming. Evangeline felt like half of herself had been ripped away. For 34 years, Thomas had been her partner, her protector, her best friend. Now there was just emptiness where he used to be, but she was not alone. Her children surrounded her with love. Sarah moved into the ranch house to keep her company. The grandchildren came by constantly, filling the house with noise and distraction. Slowly, painfully, Evangeline learned to live with the grief. She would never get over losing Thomas, but she learned to carry the loss, to fold it into her life alongside all the joy and love they had shared. She threw herself into the work of the trust, expanding the homes for women and the scholarship program. She visited schools and gave talks, sharing her story and encouraging young women to pursue their dreams. She wrote letters to the women staying at the homes, offering encouragement and hope. And in the quiet moments, she would sit on the porch and remember, the meadow full of wildflowers. Thomas's laughter. The way he had looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The life they had built together, from the ashes of her pain and his determination to do right. One summer evening in 1915, Evangeline gathered her children and grandchildren around her. She was 79 years old now, her hair white, her body frail, but her mind was still sharp, her spirit still strong. "I want to tell you all something," she said. "A story about your grandfather and me and how we came to be." She told them everything, holding nothing back. The wagon train attack, Luther Blackwood and the 4 years of captivity, The desperate flight through the desert. Thomas finding her, saving her, loving her. The life they had built together, full of love and purpose and meaning. The children listened with wide eyes. The older ones already knew parts of the story, but hearing it all laid out, the full arc of pain and healing left them awed. "I want you to remember something," Evangeline said when she finished. "I was somebody's property once. I was told I was nothing, that I was worthless, that I would never be free. But your grandfather looked at me and saw a person worth saving, worth loving. And together, we built this." She gestured to the ranch, to the family gathered around her. "All of this came from one man's decision to stop and help someone in need, so I want you to be like him. When you see someone suffering, someone who needs help, you stop. You reach out your hand. You make the choice to be kind. Because you never know what beautiful things might grow from that single act of compassion." The grandchildren promised they would remember, and they did. Evangeline's story became part of the family lore, passed down through generations. The Bridger Trust continued its work, helping thousands of women over the decades. The ranch thrived under James's care, then his sons, then his grandsons. Evangeline lived to see the end of World War I, the beginning of women's suffrage, the dawn of a new century. She died peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1920, at the age of 84. She was buried next to Thomas on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together 40 years before. At her funeral, the church was packed. Family, friends, women whose lives had been changed by the homes and scholarships she had funded. The minister spoke about her courage, her kindness, her unwavering belief that everyone deserved freedom and dignity. But it was Samuel who gave the eulogy that really captured who his mother had been. "My mother taught me that strength is not about never being broken," he said. "It is about putting yourself back together after the breaking. She showed me that love is not about possession. It is about partnership and respect and choosing each other every single day." And she proved that one person, one life lived with courage and purpose, can change the world. After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch. They ate and told stories and celebrated the incredible woman who had been the heart of their family. And when the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, they stood together on the hill where Evangeline and Thomas were buried, holding hands, a living testament to the love story that had started in a desert so long ago. The ranch continued for generations. The trust continued its work. And Evangeline's story was told and retold, a reminder that freedom is worth fighting for, that healing is possible, that love can transform even the deepest pain into something beautiful. She had been somebody's property once. But in the end, she became so much more. A wife, a mother, a grandmother, a force for good in the world. She had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and used it to build something beautiful. She had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, freedom over captivity. And in doing so, she had become exactly what Thomas told her she was that first day in the desert, her own woman, free and strong and whole. The story of Evangeline and Thomas Bridger became legend in Colorado and beyond. Their love story was written about in books and newspapers. Their trust continued to help women well into the 21st century. And every generation of Bridgers was taught about the woman who survived hell, and the man who showed her that love could heal even the deepest wounds, because in the end, that was the real story. Not just about survival, but about the choice to live fully after surviving. Not just about being saved, but about choosing to be brave enough to love again. Not just about freedom from captivity, but about freedom to build a life of meaning and purpose and joy. Evangeline and Thomas's legacy lived on in every woman who found refuge in the homes they established, in every scholarship recipient who went on to achieve her dreams, in every member of their family who carried forward their values of compassion and courage and unwavering kindness. And somewhere, in a meadow high in the Colorado mountains where wildflowers bloom every spring, their spirits rest together, finally at peace, forever free. eternally bound by a love that had transformed them both and rippled out to change countless lives. It was a love story for the ages. A testament to the power of choosing kindness, of seeing the humanity in others, of believing that everyone deserves freedom and dignity and the chance to build a beautiful life. And it all started with a cowboy who stopped to help a woman in the desert and told her the truest thing she had ever heard. Now you are your own woman.